Okay, so there have been a lot of issues with these Ducatis over the year, and this is a 2000, so the thing's about 17 years old. This clutch slave cylinder here is notorious either for the machining on the inside of the cast bore or the actual rod that goes through, the actual rod which actuates the clutch. So the rod that goes through the case that actuates the clutch within the whole housing has an O-ring, and as the rod rotates it slowly wears on the O-ring because of the machining grooves on the inside of the housing and also on the shaft. So we're going to take this apart and see which portion of this is leaking, because I have some pigment and sediment up in my reservoir and I've got those spatter marks on the other side of the bike. And it's springtime in New England, so I want to get this thing street ready, and who knows where things will go. All right, let's get into it. So, metric bike, 5mm Allen wrench, and we'll just start cracking these things loose. There's one. Some individuals find it necessary to strike this with a mallet or some such because it's really on there. But I don't know, this is gonna work itself off, so it really shouldn't be too big of a deal. It does look like I've got some corrosion on the edge there, and it also looks like this little rubber gungy, that's a technical term, a rubber gungy, has not had the finest and most gentle life. So this guy, we're probably going to end up cleaning that off. But this rod actually looks okay. So we're going to flip the bike around so that way I have all this nice flat lighting, and we're going to take off the other side and look at the hopefully dry clutch. And if it's not dry, well, then I've got more problems than I anticipated initially. So I'll be right back. All right, so through the power of movie magic and editing, we're now on the other side of the bike. This is the right-hand side with the clutch behind this. You have cylinder 1, cylinder 2, and this is the spattering that I was talking about, and it seems to be coming from what should be a dry clutch, which really isn't. So, not to offend any camera angles, take the same 5mm Allen wrench, and we're just going to start breaking these loose. One. All right, let's see if we can pry this guy off without damaging this seal. Looking good so far. All right, let me go grab the right Allen wrench. Okay, so since I only have a short 4mm Allen wrench here for these clutch springs, I'm going to do something that you should never do. So I'm going to put a disclaimer somewhere, or just tell you, don't do it like this, because this is f***ing stupid. All right, so now that that's all loose, we'll see about removing all the different parts. Yay. All right, so here is the center portion. Oh, this guy can go right there, that's fine. So this comes all the way out from across the bike. I don't know if you can see that from where you are, but they look all right. All I have to do is take these off one at a time. Now we need to break this guy out of here somehow. I don't know how to support that without damaging anything, so I'm gonna have to do some Googling and remove this whole thing and then clean it out. So more movie magic until we come back. Ooh. All right, so welcome back. It's another day, and we have a specialty tool specifically for getting this clutch off. And to get this off, we're gonna need one long bolt and two short bolts. Here's the clutch tool. I'll move this into focus for you. These are the same bolts that hold the clutch cover on. And you'll notice that these are not equally spaced. This big gap right here goes towards the back. So long bolt, short bolt, short bolt, long bolt, short bolt, short bolt. So we take this, we'll line this up, and everything lines up in there. Then you go and you line up all your holes, thread them in, once you can actually find the threads. And take your same Allen wrench and you tighten these up just snug enough to about, oh, there. How's that? Is that enough torque for you? About there. So we tighten all these up. Make sure these ones are tight. Again, just finger tight because you're holding shear forces. And then we take our trusty air gun and through movie magic, we put this on here and there it is, it's loose. It will rattle around for a little while and try and get that off with the impact gun. So first comes the nut, then you've got this inner washer, and be careful because there's also a serrated washer on the inside, and that's a locking feature. So I like to keep all these things stacked together. Then you take this metal plate off. Again, keep them all stacked together. If you want to wrap them with wire, wrap them with wire. So in case I didn't mention earlier, this socket is a big 32 millimeter 6-pointed socket. So now that that's there, we should be able to take this entire hub off. And this comes off as one unit. There is an O-ring. I'll try and keep this in frame. There is an O-ring that sits right in this little dish right here. And it just sits on in there. So make sure you don't lose that one or drop all sorts of particulate in it, because otherwise you'll be hurting. Now with these, what we're gonna do is there are 8 bolts that hold on the clutch, and these should be torqued down to about 30 to 40 foot-pounds, and I'll get the torque spec once I read the PDF manual. But again, through movie magic, I've gone and already broken these loose. All right, now that those are all loose, only 2 of mine had some red Loctite on them, and the rest of them had nothing. All right, so now that we got those off, we basically just support the weight of the basket and the whole thing comes out. And if you look at the reflection in there, you see the spooge that came out of there? That's actually Loctite. I've already taken this over to my parts washer and scrubbed it down, and that stuff will not come off. So 2 of mine were heavily Loctited and the other 6 were not. Well, since I had all sorts of disgusting grease and grime in here and clutch dust that had stuck to the oil, I went and cleaned it all out. So now that we've got a nice clean surface, because this is painted with the same paint as the engine itself, I wiped it down with some alcohol. And my alcohol is right here, denatured fuel alcohol. So wipe down your painted surface, but stay away from this seal. Do not wipe the seal down. Don't wipe the face down where the clutch basket just came from. You can just hit that with a dry rag. But the rest of this, where centrifugal force will throw all the dust and other debris, we'll take that and just clean it off. All right, so now that we're done with that, we're gonna line this guy back up, set him in there, and I'm gonna Loctite every single one of my bolts. I'm only gonna use the blue stuff because this stuff is more than enough. And we're going to torque our bolts down. So here's my first one. And yeah, just a little bit of Loctite on each one of these. And I'll see you after I've got them all in and we're about to torque them down. So a lot happened while the camera wasn't recording. I got all these bolts on the clutch finger tight, and then my wife called, so I had a good long conversation with her about what to eat for dinner. So now we've got to bring these up to 40 Newton meters of torque, which is 29.5 foot-pounds of torque-ish. And in order to do that, we got to get our handy-dandy clutch tool All right, so that's on there. I've got my torque wrench set to 40 Newton meters or 29.5 pound-feet of torque. And we're just gonna start working in 2 cross hatches of 4 correctly. There we go. That's 29.5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so that's now torqued to spec. We're gonna take that clutch tool off once more. So there's the basket. Now we've got the hub. And the way I found put this in, you basically align the hub with the spline wherever it can fit on somewhere. Hello. There it is. All right. And don't push it all the way in, because if you push it all the way in, it'll pop that little O-ring right off. Once that's on, we start putting these in the reverse order. So we take off that metal flange, and this goes on there. Then we take this whole nut piece, and if you can see in here, there's right in front of the frame. Yeah, you can see the little hole with the light. That actually lines up with the pin on the center of the hub. So you want to line both of those up. And once that lines up, you'll feel it pop in together right there. All right, make sure that serrated nut is on there, and this big nut goes back on. So this guy is torqued down to 95.8 pound-feet of torque, which is 130 Newton meters. All right, so we've got my torque wrench set at 95 pound-feet of torque. And let's start bringing this in. That's it. Take these off. And this will go back in its package for hopefully the next time I never need to use it. Next step will be to put all the clutch pressure plates and friction discs in. And we'll probably do that tomorrow because I got to go home and fire up dinner. See you guys in the next clip. All right, so here we are back again. We've got our basket in place, we've got our drum in place, everything's torqued down. And we're going to start stacking our plates and our friction discs, if I put them in the camera frame, back in the machine. So mine has 2 of these pressure plates that sit in the back, and we're going to start stacking these in. There's those 2 sit in there, and then we've got our first one. And the way I took all these out was I flipped them over and stacked them up, so that way I know which ones go where. And then we just do the rest of these. 1 friction disc, 1 pressure plate, 1 friction disc, 1 pressure plate, until we get to the end of the stack. And I'll see you after I get all these in. All right, and that's the last one. Now what we need to do is we need to get the masterpiece on there. This is actually 2 pieces. This is the clutch actuation rod here, and here's the aluminum hub. So I've taken the liberty of removing the 2 O-rings that are on here, because if you ever get any binding or friction, pardon me for offending the camera angle, if you ever get any binding or friction on the bearing that's in here, then these will actually spin in the engine and flatten out, and then you get motor oil leaking into your clutch from here, right through this bearing, and then basically it comes out at this nut, which is what I was experiencing, and it was getting slung out to the outsides and deposited all the way around here. Luckily for me, I didn't find any oil, any motor oil whatsoever on my pressure plates or my friction discs. So I'm reusing my old clutch because it's still got plenty of life left. And we're going to take a little bit of motor oil after I clean off my fingers and install my 2 brand new O-rings. Take your finger, dip it in a little bit of motor oil, and put it all over this, just to make installing these O-rings much easier. Take the first of your 2 O-rings, put it right on the end there, and press. As you press, it goes flying off into the distance. Now, as you press, I'm going to use my leg here, and I'm going to offend every camera angle I can. I'm going to take this and press it on. Grab the second one of the 2 O-rings, Now we'll take a clean portion of our rag and remove the majority of the oil off of those. 2 little O-rings are now installed. Take this whole piece and we're going to slide it through the entire assembly to the other side. There we go. Now that's seated. Alright, so now that this aluminum clutch housing's on, we're going to take these springs and start these. So a little forward pressure just to be able to get the threads started. You'll see I take 2 of my fingers. Come on, there we go. You'll see I take 2 of my fingers and I push in on the outside collar, so that way the head of the bolt isn't actually supporting the spring tension. Now I'm going to go with the opposite one, and again I push in on the outside collar just enough to make sure the threads start to engage and I don't cross thread anything, because this aluminum hub, I guess, is made out of soft butter. You really got to be careful with even the torque specs on these. They say between 3 and 5 foot-pounds. All right, so there they are, snugged up, torqued down, and next thing to do is put on the clutch cover. So we've got our gasket that goes around. We've got our 4 little collars. Now we're going to take the 2 long bolts that don't actually go into anything and seat those. And put these in here. Now we're going to take this and... Did I do that wrong? I think I did that wrong. Because this guy goes there. Nope, I did that right. Alright. There we go. So that lines up there. And we're going to take one of these long pieces of hardware, slide it into there. And one of the short pieces of hardware, put it bottom dead center into here. Just so that things don't come off. So one of the short bolts goes on the very bottom. And the other short bolt goes on the front. The last long bolt goes on the very back, right near the rear brake actuator. And we'll snug all these up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, now we're going to take these and torque these down. So those are now on. Now we're going to remove my oil filler plug, because I've left this bike to drain. There's actually an oil pan just underneath it. This looks pretty good, nice and clean. Alright, so now we're going to take a little bit more of that fresh motor oil, install the K&N KN153 oil filter on the bottom of this bike, and we're going to put it right around the O-ring here, create a good seal. Again, I wipe off my hands, just a fresh rag, used rag, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to dive my head in here and slip the oil filter up and in. There we go. That gets snugged up. With these K&Ns, we're going to take a 17mm and start snugging. And just a little past tight. Good. Just enough to start to compress that O-ring. And now we're going to fill the bike with some oil and fire it up. Alright, so now that we've got our oil level above our minimum line, I'm going to pull the funnel and set this down on a rag. Replace our filler cap. Fire it up. Oh, it's been a long time. Come on. good. Good, good. All right, I'm happy. All right, this concludes the work I needed to do on the Duca clutch. And now, once the little bit of oil from the exhaust system, when I did the oil change, burns off, I won't have that funky smell of burning oil. Well, probably the next thing I'm going to do is strip off the charcoal canister, which is behind the right-hand foot peg, right back here. So we'll take all that off, take off the PCV valves. That way if there are going to be any hot start gremlins, they won't appear. So until the next project or until the next moto vlog, keep the rubber side down.